Alright, what's up guys? We're back here with another movie review, and today we are continuing to review all of Stephen King's adapted movies, and we are here, finally, with the final Children of the Corn movie. We finally made it. I got through this entire shitty franchise. Oh, I'm so happy. You guys don't even understand. I will say, though, this movie pleasantly surprised me. The last 20 minutes of it got kind of bogged down story-wise, but the ending was better. But towards the ending, like leading up to the ending, it got kind of bogged down. But when the ending happened, it made it just a tad bit better. But this movie is all over the place. But there was a solid story here. This movie had a solid story, and it is a direct sequel to the original Children of the Corn movie. It is a pretty goddamn solid movie. It also rewrites some of the original story of the original Children of the Corn. But there's some parts of this where I was legitimately laughing because there were some legitimately funny parts of this movie. Unintentional or not. And some of the characters that ended up getting killed actually, I felt, like, specifically the second death of the movie is pretty brutal. And pretty drawn out, too, so it's kind of hard to watch. I wouldn't say hard to watch. I mean, it was just kind of unnerving, is the best way I can put it. And it's got a pretty scary slasher killer in this. It's not a bunch of kids in this one. It's like a little girl in a yellow dress there on the cover. She's actually pretty fucking scary because she's doing like cartwheels and shit all over the place while beating the shit out of you with a wrench. It's pretty fucking scary. I mean, this movie had something inside of it, and it almost fully exploited it, but in the end, it didn't even matter. I mean, in the end. But, no, in the end, it didn't even matter, and it's just like, the last 20, 30 minutes of it was just, it got too bogged down. And then I'm like, not to mention the main two characters, this woman and her son, are very, very unlikable. And they're probably the only two characters that I have a problem with. And by the end of the movie, you just end up hating every character except for the little girl killer in the yellow dress, because she's terrifying as shit. But in the end of the movie, you just fucking hate every character. And before every character dies, you just kind of hate them. They make you hate the characters in this movie. And it's just like, ugh. It had a story. I will admit, this movie had a story, and it could have been really good, but it didn't execute it well. I mean, it executed it half well. The other half, not so much. Is the best way I can put it. So the movie starts off with this like pregnant woman, and she's setting fire to a cornfield, and there's like children's screams inside the cornfield. We later find out at the end of the movie that she was actually burnt. That she was actually So I'm gonna explain right here, so I don't have to go into detail. Well, no. So the movie starts off with this pregnant woman. She's burning out a cornfield, and we don't get any explanation of what the hell this is until the end of the movie. So she's driving off, and it goes to a flash forward 13 years later, and she's got a 13-year-old kid, and she's on the road, no house, with just a truck. Doesn't have a job. And they're going from town to town. We don't find out why they're doing that either until the end of the movie. The end of the movie pretty much sums everything up. And which honestly kind of is part of the reason it bogs it down. I mean, having all this backstory packed into the ending just really ruins what you started the movie off with, in my opinion. I mean, as I said, this could have been a really good movie, but there was clearly some issues within the directing itself towards the end. It felt like maybe the director got rushed at the end of this, because this movie had an increasingly larger budget than all of the previous Children of the Corn movies combined. It had It had to have had a pretty bigger budget. It had a lot of gore. Not to say that movies that have a small budget don't have gore, but like it had some pretty flashy looking gore and it had some pretty flashy looking effects in it. And it had some pretty solid camera work. But honestly, the first half of this film looks like they put their work into it and they did a good job with it. But by the end of the movie, the other half of it, the last half of it, it just felt like they rushed through it, like they were trying to get it done in time or something. Or maybe they ran out of a budget. I don't know. But honestly, I was enjoying this movie because this movie is about an hour and 22 minutes. So, like, I'm going to say first 41 minutes of it was pretty good. But then it just started getting worse and worse. Then there was a couple scenes where I was like, all right. So after we wake up and it's 13 years later, they end up stopping at a motel, like somewhere. They don't explain anywhere. But they end up stopping at a motel and it's like they get this apartment room. They get in the motel. Well, it's a hotel room. And they go to bed. I mean, her son, well, this woman and her son, that's what I'm going to refer them to as. So this woman is asleep and her son's looking out the window because she hears some arguing or something next door. And this was one of the scenes that I laughed at because I don't know if it was supposed to be scary or stupid or just in there for suspense, but it was pretty fucking funny. So he wakes up and he hears this banging on the other side of the wall. And there's arguing. So the son gets up out of bed and he looks out the window and this like fat hooker walks out of the apartment room next to him. And she looks like she's drunk or something. She's like stumbling everywhere. And she comes up to the window and flashes her tits and she's like falling all over the place. And she accidentally falls and bashes her bottom lip on the freaking brick of the window. And she gets back up and she's like bleeding and she wipes the blood off her mouth and slaps the window with it. And she's like, fucking asshole. That made me laugh. I'm just like, wow. Fucking asshole. I legitimately thought that was funny, okay? It may sound weird to you, but I thought that was funny because she's like this fat hooker chick, and I'm just like, oh my god. She flashed a 13-year-old kid, and then she just like calls him a fucking asshole right after she busts her lip on him. It's stupid, and I love it. And she's a fat hooker. No, that made me laugh. I was laughing for a good bit after that because I'm definitely gonna be that's gonna be one of the lines that I quote. I'm gonna wipe my lip and I'm gonna be a fucking asshole. I always look for little stupid quotable lines like that in the movie and then I write them down. I like quoting. One of my favorite things to do is quote stupid lines. One of my favorites is from 80s B movie slasher called Chopping Mall. And this fat guy says, he's in like this restaurant and he says, waitress, more butter. Except he says it in like a really casual way. He's like, waitress, more butter. I love that one. There's a couple other from that movie that I just love. But that's definitely the one that stuck with me. Chopping Mall is quite a treat. Okay, now that we're talking about 80s slashers, I want to go on this one too. If you guys can guess which 80s slasher I'm talking about, which 80s slasher this quote is from, then you're a genius and you know your pop culture. I mean, you know your cult classics. Or you know film in general. That's not cranberry sauce. That's not cranberry sauce. Okay, I'm going to leave that with you. There's the quote. Think about it. It's a very unpopular 80s slasher that I highly enjoy. I'll give you a hint. The title of it has been changed several times. So, anyway, they get out of this motel, and right after that scene, and they end up stopping in this town, and we start getting these like flashbacks to the corn, and I guess, I don't know, this woman had something to do, because the cornfield that she was burning in the beginning had something to do with the murders in Gatlin. We don't find out later. So she's having these visions of kids in the corn and then burning children and like sacrifice and shit. It's weird. But they get to this town, and they end up stopping by this diner, and they make friends with this waitress chick. I'm going to call her the waitress. The waitress is like this... she's a funny character to start out, but then by the end of the movie, you're just like, oh my god, fucking kill her already. But, no, I guess the cop, while she was having these hallucinations, the town sheriff noticed that she was swerving off the road because she was having these hallucinations. So he took her truck, and she's stuck in the middle of town. So she needs a place to stay and a job now, since she's going to be there a couple weeks or even a month. So there's like this mechanic for hire in this like big old garage, and it's run by this one guy, and he's a black guy. He doesn't have anybody working for him, but he needs a mechanic. So he hires this woman, and he gives her he lets her borrow a house that's like out in the middle of nowhere. And she starts working for him, and I guess they start liking each other. But then he tries to push it a little bit, and she doesn't like that, so she tells him to get the fuck out of my house. So he gets the fuck out of there, and then she starts having these like visions, because apparently there was 3 people that got murdered in this house like 10 or 20 years ago. One woman got like fucking beat in the head in the kitchen. Next dude got throat cut in his bed, and then the last one got like head bashed on a toilet seat. And there's some really cool shots in this part that I really enjoyed. Like sometimes it will like, she'll have these visions, and then it'll do like a reverse slow motion thing where it shows you how it first happened, and then it will go forward again. It was really cool to watch. But anyway, black guy gets pissy that he gets all pissy that she declined his offer for sex. But because that's literally what she did, she declined his offer for sex, and he does not like that. But so he decides to cook up some stupid solution to fire her. So he ends up firing her, and she gets all pissy. So she goes to the diner to meet up with her waitress friend. And the waitress friend is a very interesting character, because she's kind of like sort of a feminist. There's a bunch of old dudes in the diner that show up every morning, and she'll like mess with them and shit because they're grumpy old men. More of like dickish old men, if I could say so myself. So there's this like one fat guy that's like, when you two this is literally a line from the movie. This old fat guy's like, when you two lesbians get done making out over there, I need some coffee. That's an actual line from the movie. And I was like, oh, I like this old guy. No. I'm going to get killed for saying that. No. What? Anyway, no, I guess she has this like vision in the diner that was like a recreation scene of this part where everybody gets murdered in the diner in the first movie. And then it turns out not to be real, and she almost sucker punched this kid in the face. And the old guy's like, well, shit, that lesbian's crazy. Get her the fuck out of here. And I'm just like, Oh, this is where I started to not like the main character. She became very helpless and annoying throughout this movie, and very zoned out and just like not acting at all. Big issue with this movie. So then the waitress lady stands up for her because apparently she owns the place or something. I don't fucking know. But anyway, this old guy goes back to his farm, and he's got a big barn, and like there's a truck, and this barn's got like hay stuff in it and everything. But he goes in this barn and he hears little children laughs in the barn. So he goes in there, he looks around, and there's the little girl in the yellow dress. She's standing on top of a bunch of hay bales, and she's got like a croquet mallet. She jumps down and beats the shit out of him. Doesn't kill him yet, but she wraps this like barbed wire or something on his neck. So he wakes up and he's like, "You little shit." So he gets up and he starts running at her, but the barbed wire catches his neck because apparently he didn't know that he had like a rope or barbed wire around his neck because, yeah, that makes sense. So it basically ripped his neck open and he just dies by standing there, I guess. It's a very weird kill, but you can definitely tell it's a lot more flashier than the other kills in this series. Even though I will say part 3 had the goriest kills because had the most and the goriest kills because Screaming Mad George was in the head of it. So, not a surprise, but he also did Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 4, Society, and I believe the Reanimator movies, if I remember correctly. Was that it? Urban Harvest was that. Maybe The Dentist. I think The Dentist was another movie that he was on. So, not really sure. But, no. So, that dude ends up dying. We never, like, hear anything about it at all through the rest of the movie. So then, woman goes to talk to her diner friend again, and there's this other old guy next to her, and he's being dickish again. So he asks for more coffee, and she goes up to him, and she starts... There's actually... you can tell that the waitress is very snarky at this point, and I still liked her character. So she walks over to the old guy, and she, like, unbuttons the top of her... the top of her dress, and he starts looking at her while she's pouring his coffee, and she starts distracting him with that, and then she just slowly moves the coffee pot over his pants, and she's like, "Yeah, that's what I thought." And then it's just like, "Oh, you stupid bitch, you burnt me." Oh, we haven't even got to my favorite part. That didn't make me laugh, but the third prank that she did was phenomenal, and I'm thinking about doing it to one of my friends. It was something I would do. Me and my friends do stupid shit, and it's definitely something I would do. So skip a bunch more dialogue, and a bunch more useless scenes. So of course she got fired. So she goes to the diner again, goes there with her son, and I guess she there's this other old guy that says the soup's too cold. So she takes the soup back and the spoon, and she doesn't warm the soup up, but she warms the spoon up on the fire and makes it like scalding hot, and then puts it in the soup. So when the guy takes a sip of the tomato soup, he ends up burning his tongue on the spoon, and he drops the spoon, and he's like, "Ah, shit." It reminded me of Tourette's guy. "Ah, shit." Bitch. "Ah, shit." He goes, "God damn it." So I paused the movie at that point because I was like, that reminded me so much of Tourette's guy, and I'm just like, oh my god. Because one of the main games I play with my friends is Left 4 Dead 2, and there's a mod that turns all the melee sounds and the tank sounds to Tourette's guy quotes. Dude, we've had some of the funnest times with that. There's one where, I think it was on Cold Stream. It was on that big, big bridge, and the bridge collapsed, and there was a tank that showed up, and it flung a car at us, and it hit us both off the bridge, and we both died. And right before it did that, it said faggot, or it said like faggot. The tank said like faggot or something, but I'm just like, oh my god. But getting to another point, one of my favorite quotes that happened was, I guess my friend is his username is Thunderduck, and he's like seventh best Team Fortress 2 player in the world. He's like top ranking dude, and he's in like a bunch of, he does like tournaments every Wednesday and Friday. Dude's committed to Team Fortress 2. And not to mention, every game that he gets his hands on, he completely beats the shit out of and gets all the achievements on. And he's just, holy shit. And he's really good at Left 4 Dead 2. But there was this one where he was the last one to get into the safe room on Dead Carnival. And he closed the door. I guess one of the bots was still alive because it didn't end the level yet. But the tank showed up at the safe room, and he's like, put a shirt on! And he's like stuck outside the door because he can't get in that safe room. And he's like, put a shirt on. It's pretty funny. But moving on, then the mechanic, I guess he's closing up shop for the night, and he notices that a little girl has entered the arena, or his a little girl has entered the arena. But I guess he there's this little girl entering his like garage. So he looks around for her, and she beats his knee. This was a brutal kill. I was kind of cringing watching this one. So he's like limping because he's got like a limp in his leg. So she beats his kneecaps out with this wrench. And then she just starts doing cartwheels all over the place, and he's like screaming on the ground. So then she starts beating his head a couple times, like 3 times with the wrench. But he's still moving. And then she kicks him in the jaw, and he's like got blood everywhere. And he's like slowly crawling towards this truck, and he gets inside the truck and shuts the door. But then the little kid just starts beating out the windows to scare the shit out of him. It's a pretty brutal kill, and it doesn't end there either. So then he crawls out of the truck to his desk, and he tries to get a Glock or something out of his desk. And then she just takes this freaking steel pole and jams it through his back. And if that weren't enough, she jams it through his back and then props him up and then starts beating it deeper into his body with this fucking monkey wrench. I'm just like, oh my god. It's a pretty brutal and drawn out kill, I will say so myself. I was kind of cringing watching it. It was pretty brutal. Pretty brutal. So yeah, she got a second kill. So skipping more dream sequences, and I guess the little girl eventually ends up killing the school's principal by bashing her head in her own home. And then there's some more slow motion dream sequences, and we eventually find out that the little girl is like a version of herself, like the version of herself when she was a little girl. Like, I guess it's the little girl version of our main character, the mother. And the waitress tells her this because apparently the waitress is a part of the cult. This is where the story gets really bogged down. And apparently she was burning the cornfield. When she burned the cornfield, she was killing the rest of the crazy, deranged children. And apparently the children were originally from Gatlin. It's kind of a bog. This is where the story just loses itself, and it felt rushed. So apparently she's actually been doing all these murders. So honestly, at the end of this, it just gets bogged down. And then she ends up asking the waitress lady, before she reveals that she's actually a bad guy, she asks the waitress lady to take care of her kids. So she runs off to do some stuff, and I guess the waitress lady meets back up with her at this house, and there's a bunch of dead people in it. And apparently the mother has actually been murdering all these people along because, again, the little girl's a version of herself. And the kids in the town have been preparing to take over and turn the town into another Children of the Corn cult. Kill all the adults, except for the waitress, apparently, because she's like the new gas station attendant or the blue man or the preacher in the original movie. So she's the new adult character of the group. So the mother tries to get to her kid, and she eventually meets up with him, and he ends up stabbing her and killing her. So then she walks out of the house with all these stab wounds, and she just lays down and dies, and then there's a voiceover. The movie felt so rushed. And then there's a 3-month later flash forward, and her son is now the new Isaac wannabe, and the waitress is like the basically like the person whispering in this kid's ear or something like that. And then the movie ends with her glaring at the camera. I'm still thinking of that spoon thing. I want to do that now. Fuck, dude, that's hilarious. Mainly this movie started off strong, but if they wouldn't have rushed it and really thought about what they're doing with the storyline, they may have been able to make the best Children of the Corn movie yet. I'm thinking that there needs to be a good remake of this movie. And I'm not talking about a shitty Pet Sematary 2019 remake, because that movie did suck. I'm talking about like a good Children of the Corn remake with a big budget, like they did with It. It was very faithful to Stephen King's way of writing. That's what I hate about fans. They only watch the movies. They never actually read the books. The It 2017 and 2019 remakes are very faithful to how King actually writes his books. Trust me, I've read a lot of his books. The violent and gritty and dark humor of that movie and those movies and just everything, the depressing side of it, that is how Stephen King writes his books. The It 1990 miniseries, I've always hated it because it never even once captured the originality of how Stephen King writes his books. It was a terrible adaptation of a very good book. Except for the kid orgy. We can leave that out. King really didn't need to put that in the book, okay? That we don't talk about that, but aside from everything else, it is a good book. I mean, let's take everything out except for that, okay? Let's just take that part out and leave the book as it is. Take that one scene out. That's about 12 pages or so. And leave the rest in. So, I got nothing. Well, let's rate it. Why do I still have that? I'm gonna rate. Okay, you guys can see that. He dummy thick. I'm thinking, yeah. I'm thinking I'm going to rate this one, I'm going to rate it a C, because the second half of the movie, I mean, over half this movie is pretty bad, so I'm going to rate it a C. This is the highest rating I've given one of these movies yet, so remember to leave a comment, like, and subscribe.